Welcome to the news hour. We begin in Myanmar, where the military has intensified its crackdown on protesters who want the generals to give up power. Local media are reporting soldiers opened fire on protesters in Mandalay. Now, that's Myanmar's second largest city. The coup leaders have warned demonstrators dissent against them could lead to 20 years in prison. And for the first time since the coup, the military has deployed tanks and soldiers. And deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi is to spend more days under house arrest after her detention was extended. In a moment, we'll speak to Al Jazeera's Divya Gopalan in Hong Kong. But first, here's Scott Heidler with this report.
There were soldiers and armored vehicles on the streets. Another tense night in Myanmar. But despite the security patrols and an internet blackout, protesters gathered for a 10th straight day. One group of the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM for short, stood in front of the central bank in Yangon and continued with their calls for the military government to step down and the country's democratically elected leaders to be released.
We are protesting peacefully, without weapons and with no intention of violence, to call for CDM and fight for the freedom of government staff.
This as the military junta issued a statement on its Facebook page outlining the possible punishments for protesters, saying any act, spoken or written, that expresses or incites hatred of the government could lead to 20 years in prison. People gathered outside a court in the capital, Naypyidaw, hoping that deposed civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi would be released on Monday. Those hopes soon dashed.
According to the remand which was set, today is the last day of the remand period. But from the discussions with the district justice, the remand period is now until the 17th, not today.
Suu Kyi was one of the first to be detained in the early hours of the coup 2 weeks ago. She's been charged with illegally importing 6 walkie-talkie radios. According to a monitoring group, more than 400 people have now been detained since the February 1st coup. There's a vast range of people within that group, and that's of real concern for 23-year-old fortune teller Charlotte. A fellow Yangon fortune teller was arrested a few days ago after a video of him praying for the military to fail went viral.
Since they're dictators, they can make up whatever laws they like to oppress us. We astrologers are like birds in their hands. If they squeeze, we are dead. If they let us fly, we are free. This is the nature of dictatorship. And it's not just happening to us, it's everyone.
And that's probably why protesters are coming out in strength. The ruling National League for Democracy NLD party won by a landslide in last November's election and was extremely popular. Most see this move by the military as a nullification of their vote and their voice. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's cross over to Divya Gopalan, who's monitoring events for us from Hong Kong. And Divya, what more are we hearing about this firing in Mandalay that's been ongoing for the last few hours and obviously is part of a very turbulent day overall?
That's right. From what we understand and local reports on the ground, about 1,000 people had been protesting or demonstrating peacefully outside a commercial bank, and not long after, about 10 trucks came with police and security forces, and they started firing rubber bullets and using slingshots to try and disperse the protesters. Our sources also tell us that journalists were threatened who had been trying to report on the incident, and some journalists had even been beaten. But there was also action in other parts of the country, in Yangon, which is the largest city in Myanmar, where much of the protest movement and the focus had been. People still gathered, but not necessarily in the large numbers we have seen in recent days. One of the reasons could be that there is a large military presence on the ground with armored trucks and tanks. People still turned out shouting at those trucks and tanks, drivers honking their horns in disapproval. But there is much concern that the situation could escalate now, given that many of the troops that are being seen on the ground are from a particular unit known for their brutality against ethnic minority and protests in the past. Meanwhile, there's also a worry as night falls here. Myanmar is now under a curfew. Many of the protesters have returned home, but that doesn't mean that they are safe in any way, particularly due to the changes in the laws over the weekend, which now allows the security forces and the police to make arrests and go search people's houses and take them away without a court order.
For the update, thanks very much. Divya Gopalan for us there, our correspondent in Hong Kong. Let's cross over to Kyaw Win. He's the director of the Burma Human Rights Network in the United Kingdom. Joins me now from London via Skype. Mr. Win, thank you for your time. I mean, curfews and arrests at night. The military strategy seems to suggest sort of stamping out all potential dissent. Is it really that simple?
Hi, thanks for having me today. Yes, the situation is now go back to when the military rules, previous years, for previous decades. They are raiding. They can raid any houses. They can, search any house without any warrants. So I mean, people are now get fear. A lot of fear. The fear is increasing among the population that the military could very soon, in coming days, they are going to step up, more violence crackdown among the protesters, and also they are chasing and they are arresting more people, on their homes and residence and on the street as well.
Indeed, we're getting news that as many as 400 have been arrested so far. That's raising alarm bells for the international community. Is raising alarm bells enough? Should the international community be doing more, saying more, acting more?
Actually, the arrest is rapidly increasing, and every day they are arresting across Burma, hundreds of people. And the people, local people, came out to the street to protect these people, But the thing is, important thing is international community need to put more pressure, because this military general would respond on the heavy pressure, because from their subordinates, the other generals, they also fear. They fear that their future will be in danger, because they are associating in a treason, in a very, very heinous crime in a country they are committing now. So international community need to put more pressure, more isolate this military illegal military coup, the generals, and any government officers and step down cut down the communication with them and put more pressure.
If that's the case, I mean, what we are seeing, certainly on the Myanmar front, is the fact that the protest movement seems to be unlike anything the country has seen before. So one wonders where the social and civil disobedience continues, what traction and what direction it goes into, if it is going to be continually squeezed by the military in the coming days and weeks. What do you think, and how do you think they're going to react?
This is the very, let me explain you that the more the people create more pressure, more the civil disobedience increase, the military will respond with more violence. And if the international community put pressure, could stop this violence. So the pressure from the public will increase and increase. At the end, the government would shut down and they will not able to operate. Today, you see that because of the bank staff, government bank employees, they stopped going to the job. So they raided to the quarters where they live, and the local people came out to protect them. So they failed. That means what they have done is they withdraw all the cash from the banks, and they took some unknown place. That means the government banking system also going to shut down very soon.
What is the position of the courts? Because they face a very difficult position. They are straddling the needs of their, you might say, military overlords versus a form of democracy that the country has been experiencing for several years now. Are they a force still to be reckoned with? And would the military recognise any edicts or adjudications from any lower, upper or Supreme Court?
According to the 2008 Constitution, the military is above the law. So they never recognize our other civil codes. And that is a big issue with the 2008 Constitution. That's why we are asking to abolish this undemocratic constitution.
Kyaw Win, it's interesting to hear your thoughts, and thank you very much for your time and joining us here on Al Jazeera. Thank you.
You're welcome.